Mitchell Oster, Oscar Valdez, Summer Panino,
Present.
Angel Ann Flores, Esau Hernandez, Steve White, Mamie Starr, Richard Silverman.
Here, present.
Thank you. Has everyone had the opportunity to review the minutes of the last meeting? And if so, may I have a motion to approve? Been properly moved and seconded to move on the minutes of 10:27. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We'll now go, is there any additions or deletions to the agenda? Anyone online have any comment to that?
Nothing online.
Mr. Bollinger, do you have anything? Public comment online?
No request to comment at this time.
Okay. Mr. Fowler?
Yes, Chair. We did receive public comment, and I'll read off to you a summation of the comments and requests sent to the redistricting email account, excluding off-topic spam and administrative notifications. We have 8 different emails. Email 1 from Kathleen Garcia praising Miguel and commenting that Area 2 should be part of Area 1. Email 2 from, the second email is from Tanisha Marie Williams, opposing dividing up San Joaquin County into 3 districts. She wants the commission to keep Tracy as part of San Joaquin County. Third email is from Mimi Starr, recommending a map that takes Plan E and puts Lathrop and the Central Delta back in with Tracy and moves Ripon and Escalon in with Manteca. Fourth, emails from Jermaine Clark, commenting that the map proposed that runs north and south will benefit Stockton and give them a larger voice than the rest of the county, diminishing the voices in agriculture and the smaller communities. We have almonds, wine, and various other crops that make up the largest economic industry in this county and should be represented fairly. District 4 can cover the north towards Lodi and east towards Farmington. District 5 can cover the south and east past Escalon. This would make sure we have a voice for agriculture. Fifth emails from Clifford Santiago commenting that he watched the Board of Supervisors meeting on November 2nd regarding supervisorial redistricting, and he has concerns about his district. I live in District 5, and I don't believe it's fair that my district is the one that has to change the most. District 5 is South County and has always represented the interest of South County. District 5 should move more east as it represents our agriculture and families that have lived in this district for over 100 years. The community east of Tracy includes schools like Delta Charter and New Jerusalem, who send their children to Tracy to attend high school. The families also shop and spend time in Tracy. South County is more than just a commuter district. What district doesn't have the majority of their residents commuting for work? I know Stockton sends many of their residents to Tracy and Lathrop to work. I'm tired of Stockton getting preferential treatment at the expense of all the other cities in San Joaquin County. Sixth emails from Sherry Campbell, commenting that when drawing the district lines, it makes sense that Manteca and Lathrop should be together in District 3. Please look at the communities of interest. How about Manteca, Lathrop, fire department, traffic, water issues, shopping, restaurants, crime, etc. Both Lathrop and Manteca share these important issues. Lathrop and Manteca residents need to speak as one voice on these concerns. Seventh email from Crystal Silveira, commenting that we must make sure our agriculture industry remains a priority. If you look at the community of interest, Draft Plan E makes sure our agricultural districts, Districts 4 and 5, have a strong voice. District 3 combines Manteca and Lathrop that share common interests like water, traffic, public safety, and economic expansion. District 1 and 2 incorporates most of the interests in Stockton. This map is fair to all communities of interest, population works, and what had been traditionally used. And finally, the 8th email received at 2:05 p.m. today from Alicia Davis, who comments, first, I'd like to thank the RAC for all the hard work you're doing to make sure that San Joaquin County gets this right. I know it isn't an easy task. I very much appreciate your diligence in making sure that we draw the lines in a way that considers each city's unique character while respecting shared commonalities that make us the truly beautiful valley that we are. Fair and equitable representation at every level of government is critical to sustaining existing support systems while enhancing accessibility to future opportunities. Drawing the lines correctly helps to ensure that residents and their interests are properly represented by elected officials who reside in the local region, understand the dynamics, and can therefore relate to their experiences. This is why it is important to me that communities are kept whole and that we do not draw the lines that divide them. Drawing the lines correctly not only strengthens the morale of impacted communities, it strengthens the viability of our regional economy and increases the likelihood of appropriate funding allocations and critical resources per the needs of each district. After studying and reviewing several iterations that seem to address many of the aforementioned concerns, I'm pleased to express my support for Maps E and North and Lodi. Thank you again for your time, attention, and diligence on these tasks. I appreciate your consideration of my and others' public comments during your decision-making process. And Chair, as to proposed maps submitted by the public, we received several maps that the Redistricting Partners consultant will discuss in today's presentation under publicly submitted maps. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Feller. Before we move on, is there anyone in the audience who wishes to address the Commission? Anyone in the audience wishing to address the Commission? Seeing none, we shall proceed forward. Any RAC member disclosures, any contacts with locally elected officials, public entities, or lobbyists with the purpose of influencing the RAC? Mr. Morwin.
Just a disclosure, I spoke with Supervisor Patty the other day regarding some of the comments that were made during the meeting attended last week at the supervisors meeting, and we just went over some questions he had. I gave him a little bit of information on what our responsibilities were and what we're moving forward. It was a very brief conversation, probably less than 5 minutes, and it was just more informative for him to ask some questions and me to let him know what we were tasked with when we began this process and the extensive amount of training we had before we even made it to the map drawing department, so to speak. And he sounded good, and that was it. So.
Thank you. Mr. Grunsky?
Yeah, I talked to Supervisor Patty as well, and we just, his only concern that he was concerned they were only going to get one map, or he was just trying to clarify, hey, do we get one map? Do we get a couple maps? So we don't know. We'll figure that out. And then we talked about upcoming boxing matches for about 5 minutes, and total conversation of about 6 minutes. So that's it.
Okay. Ms. Ibeck.
Just to let you know, the League of Women Voters have asked me to come and speak this Saturday, which will really be a retrospective. But another member of that panel will be somebody from the State Redistricting Commission. So it should be interesting, but that's this Saturday. Thank you.
Ms. Baird.
I'm a member of the San Joaquin Human Trafficking Task Force, and they asked for announcements, and I announced this meeting, did a little brief summary of what we were going to be doing, and I urged them to either Zoom in or show up. I also, on the same day, had another meeting with a group called the San Joaquin Immigration Integration Collaborative, mostly Southeast Asian and Hispanic folks, and told them the same thing, that this was the time they should either call in or come and talk and take a look at what we've got, gave them the website. That's it.
Thank you.
Sure.
Ms. English.
Yes, I had conversations on Saturday, October 30th. We had some events in Tracy. The first one was at the airport, and I ran into two of the residents, one from Antigua and one from Tracy, and it's like, what happened? I said, what do you mean what happened? What happened to New Jerusalem? And I'm like, oh, because I thought about it, and I contacted Mr. Fowler, too, about it. And so I basically did the same thing, gave him information, where to write to, where to find the maps. And one of them that wanted Manteca, still part of District 5, I said, can you imagine if we split Tracy? And his friend goes, yeah, we can't have that. So he gets it. So, and then Mountain House had their Diwali, and I ran into our Board of Supervisor, Robert Rickman. And briefly, because it was so hard to talk there, I apologized to him, too, because prior to that, I met some people at the airport. And I apologize about the New Jerusalem. It should have stayed on District 5, and it made a lot of sense. So with that, he goes, "What do you mean?" Like, whoa. But so I think that was also discussed at the Board of Supervisors meeting, because I did watch that. So I apologize to my District 5 about when we were so involved with Stockton and the numbers. That was an oversight on my part, but we'll talk about that today. And then yesterday I met with a lady that was at the noon Rotary meeting that we had. She also belongs to the Tracy Women's Club that's been there for 100 years. And she wanted me to show her some maps. So I took her my last map. I gave her the information. And I said if she had any concerns to also call in or write in. So that was the end of the discussion with Sherry Myers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Starr, is it just about someone that you did meet with? Please come forward. Please come up to the, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman DeBrum. I met with the Lodi AEUW Be Informed Committee last week, presented them with the talking points, also presented the maps that were given to the public at the last meeting, and encouraged them to go on the websites and to come to these meetings as this process wraps up.
Thank you very much. The only call that I had, and I spoke briefly, about 5 minutes with Mr. Rickman on Monday. During the conversation, he had alluded to that, he was upset by what he had saw, and I says, I couldn't tell by your demeanor. But anyway, it was through the entire process, and we talked about what we were going through, the process that we were going through. He wanted to certainly, and he alluded to, and I certainly understand, because when I moved to Manteca in 1984, Robert Cabral was the chairperson or on the Board of Supervisors at that time, and South County of Escalon and Ripon, Manteca, the southern portion of Manteca, was all part of District 5. And of course, today you're looking at a lot higher population and what we need to look at and how we need to move forward with the process. So that all lasted for about 5 minutes, and I think that I told him that he had to go online. He had not seen any new maps that were drawn, and I told him that he should do that. And that concluded the conversation with him. Anyone else? Okay. Any contacts? Any other contacts that were made? Yes, ma'am.
I did forget one. Tika, for the downtown Tracy community, they meet, and they want to meet with me on Friday about redistricting. So I don't know what that's about. They just send me the information. So Friday at 9 a.m. If they still want to meet after this meeting, then I will meet with them.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Chaffee, you may begin. Mr. Kwong.
Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, and committee members. I want to kick it off first because this is your last meeting hearing, and I want to express on behalf of all the staff all of our appreciation for your efforts. You've gone through in a short amount of time, since I think probably just really early summer to about now, 9, maybe 10 meetings. I think it's 9, but that's a lot of meetings. And to that extent, we're really appreciative of you folks participating, being diligent, and you folks as well as all the alternate members as well. You've had a very committed staff here and consultant team to help us out, to walk us through the entire process. I think Mo's not here, but she's upstairs, and it's been instrumental to the process as well. So I just want to make sure that you knew our entire staff here has been very appreciative of this entire effort on your end. This is our job on an everyday basis, but from your perspective, you're volunteering, and we really appreciate all the time you put into it, especially the short amount of time. Now, where I wanted to kick it off first, though, is the goal this evening is hopefully we as a staff can provide you any other information given in terms of what's transpired to date from the board's input at the recent meeting to this meeting, as some of you folks have already just discussed about in terms of what we can do. We've actually developed some additional maps for your consideration, and we'll be reporting back, of course, next week. Next week will be chair and vice chair presenting the recommendation of a map or two, or however many that you see fit as a committee to move forward. But hopefully to that end, we have enough information for you in regard to these additional maps for public input for your consideration tonight. And then in terms of the rest of the schedule, what's going to happen is the board can take action November 16th on that map, and then they will be able to take final action on December 7th. And if they want to make more adjustments, what they'll be doing is there's one more meeting where they can theoretically take action on December 14th before the constitutional deadline of December 15th. So with that, again, our appreciations, and then what I'd like to do is pass the baton on to Mr. Chaffee at this point.
Mr. Chaffee. Thank you, Mr. Kwong.
Thank you for that. Thank you for having me back. So as we have in pretty much all of our meetings, we'll start off with Fair Maps Act criteria, just a reminder. We'll go through some Board of Supervisors comments and the COI themes. We'll follow that up with the 3 draft maps that you've all seen, and then we'll talk through recommendations. So let's jump in. So as we all know, we're under the Fair Maps Act for the first time. And the basic criteria that it asks us to follow throughout this process is fivefold. Create relatively equal size districts. Make sure each are contiguous. Try to maintain communities of interest as much as practicable. Follow city and census designated place boundaries. And then the 5th criteria is try to make them compact as much as possible. All these plans that we're presenting to you meet all these criteria, and of course we're looking for your feedback as we move forward to a recommended maybe 2 or 3 possible to the Board of Supervisors. So I know David and Glenn have talked through the lengthy process that you guys have all undertaken, so thank you so much for working through in such a thoughtful manner. A lot of the work product that you've seen has been driven by the community input that we've had and following the process. So I think one thing that's really important is just to remember the themes that we've talked about, I want to say, for the last 5 meetings. Is unite Tracy with Mountain House, respect the rural agriculture areas of the county, the western and the eastern, respect the Delta. We've had some conversation of making sure it's in 2 districts. And then with Stockton, because of its size, look at other the USD lines, major thoroughfares and neighborhood lines as we divide it. I think the chair has said this, I don't know, maybe 15 or 20 times. Don't split Manteca. And then another great point, I think, is to unify the port in 1 district so that 1 supervisor can be focused on that element. And then, as I think everyone is aware, we presented draft plan D2 to the Board of Supervisors and a summary of the process on the 2nd of November. And these are the highlights, I think, of those comments. As Commissioner Barrett has said before, we should try to unify North Stockton along 8 Mile Road. And to do that, we can move Waterloo into District 4 in the D2 and D3 map discussions. that District 5 should have additional unincorporated agricultural land. This has come up a couple times. We don't map Plan E does this with a Lathrop and Manteca district. Another discussion was having the delta in both districts 3 or 4. And I think the last one the last comment is pretty important, and that's the idea that the RAC should recommend multiple maps to the Board of Supervisors. One of the supervisors talked about having 3 plans submitted, but I think it's definitely that they'd like some options. I also wanted to point out that there have been maps submitted since the 2nd, and one of the public submitted maps is actually submitted by Mr. Commissioner Mooney, and I think one thing it does really well is touch on the Lathrop-Manteca unification in a different iteration than the one that we present in Plan E. And I think there'll be time if we want to bring that map up and talk it through later in the discussion. But I just wanted to flag that, and also flag that there are additional plans out there. If you don't like the 3 options we've presented to you, we can pull them up in Districtor, we can talk them through, and you can provide feedback of, we like this plan, let's make this 1 tweak to it, and we'll recommend it to the board, or make 7 tweaks to it, and we'll recommend it to the board. But those are the Board of Supervisor comments from the 2nd. And then the other thing I know you're sick of is reminding us what the current lines are and why we're here. Is that we're severely overpopulated, right? District 4 is well underpopulated at negative 7.6% from the ideal due to its slow growth this cycle in the last 10 years. And District 5 is well overpopulated at 14.3% due to the fast growth in the Tracy Mountain House area. So I'd like to represent to you D2. This is where we left off the last meeting. And it really makes 3 major or minor, depending on how you look at it, changes to Plan D. We moved the line to Pershing to Unify Country Club. We moved quite a bit, but not as much as you'll see in D3. But we moved the northern border of District 2 to 8 Mile Road along the northwestern corner, and then we moved Murata over into District 3. So these maps show those changes, and you can also see with the overlay of the current lines that although this is somewhat a minor or connecting or preserving, the cores of current districts, it is a major alteration, right? District 3 really changes orientation in both D2 and D3. And I think you'll see with Plan E, which really came from a lot of the supervisorial comments, we've created another plan for you as an option to discuss and make changes to or just talk through. So you can see in this plan, its deviation is 5.4%, just making sure. And so we're well within the 10% tool we can use on total deviation. So there is ability to shift this district if there's interest. Of course, the other thing to note is District 1 Latino CVAP, it's at 49.4%, so it's well above where we want to be at above 47.7. So that checks the box. Now D3 was a further change from D2, incorporating some of the Board of Supervisors comments. This one, we were able to move District's 2 line to 8 Mile Road. And this was accommodated by shifting District 3 west into Stockton, moving Waterloo into District 4, and then moving District 5 further east to include some of the unincorporated territory under Manteca. You can see that we don't go past Ripon, but we do incorporate some unincorporated agricultural land south of Manteca in District 5. You can see that District 3 is really kind of, still has French Camp, it has all of Manteca, but its foot has been removed. This was moved into 5. And then you can see what happened with District 2. District 1 stays the same, but District 3 has moved westward to take in more of Stockton, and District 2 is then allowed to move north to incorporate all along 8 Mile Road. So those are the major shifts, and you can see that both Murata and Waterloo are in District 4 now. So District 4 has gained another small community. So these are the current lines. Again, although there are changes, it still has a slightly different architecture than the current lines. The final plan, I should go through deviations. So this deviation is much larger. It's 9.4%. We really tested the upper bounds on this plan. But you can see that District 1 hasn't changed. It's at 49.4. My dyslexia coming forward a little bit. So that's Plan D3. The final plan, Plan E, is a major modification. We've seen plans like this in the past, but the real impetus for this was comments about how District 5 has lost its South County connection and its ag connection, and the wish to move it easterly. So you can see that it picks up at Ripon and Escalon. The other element that this changes is that it moves Manteca and Lathrop into a district that's now western and includes the Delta. So I think those are the major architectural changes with this plan. And you can see that, well, this next slide, you can see that this is much closer to the cores of the current district lines, where District 5 has actually grown, I think, probably larger by area by picking up Escalon and Ripon and some of the unincorporated, and most of the unincorporated areas along or south of the Manteca border. And you can see that this line here is basically the Manteca city border and Lathrop border. So both Manteca and Lathrop are wholly within District 3, goes up into French Camp, and then takes in the Delta. You can see, though, that District 1 is the same. District 2 is very similar to D3, where it goes up to the 8 Mile Road line, and then District 4 it's got that 7 again. So it's very similar to the prior construction that we in the D2 and D3 series. And then checking for deviations, we've got 5.2%. So this is a much closer in deviation, and we've got a 94.3%. So there was a slight alteration, I guess, of District 1, but it moved by 1.1%. So it's still above that 47.7, that ideal that we're looking towards. So now what we really need to work through for the rest of the evening is going through these draft plans, proposing changes that you like made, to your final recommendations, and then take a vote of the committee on what recommended plans you'd like to move forward to the Board of Supervisors.
I, for one, would like to see Mr. Mooney's reiteration of that.
Sure. So this is Commissioner Mooney's new map, and you can see that he's created base. This is right? So he's connected, like in a lot of our maps, Tracy, Mountain House, and Lathrop together. He's moved Manteca into a district that includes Escalon and Ripon and the western portion of the county, or eastern. Thank you. And then he's drawn a new District 3 that includes western Stockton and goes up and includes Lodi. District 1 is a little bit larger than the ones we've seen, but its CVAP is above the 47.7% target. It's at 48.5. And you also have a similar cut in Stockton. I think this is. I think it's Harding. At one point, hopefully the streets come up. But I believe this is Harding to Wilson. And you also can see, I believe this is Pershing, so that we have Country Club Hole like we talked about last meeting. The other element to look at is it's very well balanced. So, sorry.
Ms. Ibeck.
Country Club is actually split.
Is that the B? Is that the original, or is that the B?
This is B.
Okay.
I think this isn't Pershing here.
Yes.
Oh, I see what you're saying. I'm sorry. You're right. I always focus too much on the eastern flank. But I think one of the things with this map, because its deviation is I think it's like under 2%.
0.76.
Yeah. Then there can be changes. Like if we wanted to, we could, I think, expand and ensure Country Club was whole. Good. So I think this is an option that follows from the Board of Supervisors discussions and is an option for consideration like all the other publicly submitted maps. And if anyone wants to bring up specific district or map that they love to work through as a commission, we can do that. I also have Maptitude ready, so if we want to pull up D2 or D3 or E, we can pull those up and do live line drawing tonight.
Okay, so before we go, I'm going to open up public hearing again. That's going to allow anyone in the audience who has questions, like to address the commission. Does anyone have any questions? Yes, sir, please come forward. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
My name is Francisco Galvez. I live in the community, the small community between Arch and Mariposa. And what I heard right now about the map, that District 1 wasn't going to change. In the map that was shown earlier, we're going to switch over to another district. And we're kind of don't want to oppose that.
Okay, so if I could ask Mr. Chaffee, could we bring that up and then answer this gentleman's question?
So the one you had earlier,
Any of the Ds or the E.
Okay, that'd be cool. I just didn't have the presentation.
Just a question, are you concerned about staying in District 1, or are you worried
yes.
about moving?
Yeah,
to another?
that's our concern, is staying in District 1.
So this is the current, this is the District 1 overlay with the current lines. So you can see where it traces, and maybe pulling up.
So we're off frontage, which is between Arch Road and Mariposa.
Is there a way to determine how far out of the district that he is?
Because I guess we get cut off from that.
Most of the maps are showing 99 as the boundary, and
this is 99.
they're just on the east side of 99.
Right.
They're just on the east side of 99.
All the side streets that run off the frontage road.
Gotcha.
So
Would it be Arch?
So so District 1 currently in its D2 and D3 form uses 99. You want to put this, just put this one up. It's just, I can zoom in
Are we
here.
on the east side or west side of 99?
East.
East side?
Okay. And you're not in the Garden Acres area?
No.
So I mean, I think this would cut you into
cut-
District 3.
Right.
And what is the population of that area
Here's
that
Mariposa.
we're talking about?
Pretty close to about 700.
700, which exceeds the minimus technical number.
Small community there. It's on like 4 streets.
So Station, Duck Creek, is it here?
That would be right by Arch Road. Arch and 99.
That stays as one, doesn't it?
You said 4th Street?
Arch. Arch Road.
Is it south of? Carpenter.
Yeah, see, this is our neighborhood there.
So I think it's right here.
Street names?
Marfagoa,
Marfagoa, Clark Drive,
Oh, I see it.
Montfort.
Park Drive, all that.
Clark. And then Arch is further south.
Right. That's Marfagoa there.
I mean, I think is this Arch here? Okay. So if we want to include this whole area, into District 1. Oops, no, new district.
Is that the number that you have, Mr. Bollinger? About 700 in that area that could be taken in?
Yeah, 712 is what I have. It's going to drop our Latino CVAP number to 48.87, which is just above the 47.7 that we were trying to reach.
Are you in map E?
This is D2.
What about a map E? Yeah.
I would have to switch.
Oh,
I can only have one operating GIS map at a time, sorry.
Mr. Oster.
Chris, I have a question about Commissioner Moody's map on the country club side. If it's not clear to me which would be preferred by anybody, but if it were to be unified in the context of this VRA question of District 1, either by pushing all of it into the portion that is to the west, which I believe is in Commissioner Mooney's 3, his new novel 3. If all of Country Club was in that District 3, presumably that would increase the Latino population in 1 by bringing
the percentage, yeah.
the percentage by bringing that line all the way to Pershing, and then might accommodate this community of interest that we have here tonight by including it in 1. That could be a swap that perhaps benefits Country Club being together and maintaining a solid VRA number for District 1. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think swapping out Country Club for this portion may work. With District 1, we've kind of locked it in some respects because of the VRA. So I don't want to say I can or can't do something without actually doing it.
And I think my only other comment on this was just that this map starts out like last meeting with such a tight similarity between all the 5 districts that we have some play.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of this initial starting point. If we're talking about making modifications, we have room to modify because it starts out so equal.
Totally. Thank you. I'm sorry, I don't.
Before we finish, we're going to bring this issue back in order to take a look at it before we conclude this evening, and how we can see how we can make that happen. So, any other comments from the public? Any other comments from the public? Seeing none, I'm going to bring it back up front. So, any questions?
Yes.
Pensky.
So we have these 3 maps specifically here stapled together for a reason, I presume, or is this kind of feedback from the supervisors? Is it random? I mean, I got 3 maps stapled together. Just kind of curious about
I'll let
this.
Mr. Chaffee answer this, but I'm just assumption this is where we came off at the last meeting, off of the D maps, asking him to start pulling and picking and seeing what we can do to improve the map as we go forward.
I think D2 and 3 really came from discussions from the last meeting that were also informed by D3, was also informed by the comments by the supervisors. And then I think Plan E really was something that we felt as a team that we had to present to you because of the comments from the board, so that we didn't want to go through all this process, all the work, and the board to create a completely different map at the end of the day, right? So we wanted to show you a version of the comments from the board that was a starting point for a discussion for you to undertake.
So that kind of leads me in. I mean, we basically sent them a first draft. They sent you back with some edits, essentially, and then that's what's before us. And that's kind of, I would really like to spend a lot of time working off these 3 maps. If we keep looking at these other maps, they really aren't taking the supervisor's comments into consideration, whereas I feel these maps are. So if we just keep adding maps and adding maps, we're just having the same discussion. We're going to send it up to the supervisors. They're going to be like, well, this isn't what we were talking about, and send it where at that point. I don't mind including another map or anything, but I feel like we were given these 3 maps for a reason.
Any other comment? Yes, Ms. Baird.
I like D3 because I remember when I watched the supervisors meeting, Kathy Miller did say, and I think she made a point that I hadn't remembered, that Lodi really doesn't want any of Stockton, and I think that's absolutely correct. Knowing people who live in both, I like D3 because it takes Stockton up to 8 Mile Road, which is the upper limits of Stockton, and it keeps it away from annoying Lodi, because we would not like to annoy our cities if at all possible. So, I like that one.
Stockton doesn't necessarily want Lodi either, in some cases as well.
Absolutely
A double-edged
true.
sword.
You're right. You're right. Absolutely true.
Mr. Kwong, do you have?
Sorry for the interruption. I just wanted to echo both Chris and Commissioner Grunsky's comments where this iterative process is both a result of the input we got at the board and what we felt like we heard from the board, as well as some of you folks might have watched it. And so we're trying to address it by providing you basically some options.
Yes, ma'am.
First of all, I would like to thank the team, consultants as well as the staff for having discussed these issues with the supervisors and taking their input to heart and giving us some plans that we can review. I will say I like the improvements to North Stockton District 2 in both Plan E as well as Plan D3. I think it does create a more whole region in North Stockton. I'll admit, I think Plan E looks pretty good. I don't want to speak to District 5, but there is less of a disruption from the current district lines. Manteca is kept whole. As I mentioned earlier, North Stockton is in good shape, and Manteca and Lathrop most likely have a number of issues that do overlap, even though recognizing that Lathrop might have a little bit more western-facing, Manteca a little more ag-facing. But I'd leave that to experts in Manteca here to speak. But anyway, I think these are some viable options.
We'll go to Mr. Morwitt and then Ms. Panino.
Yeah, when we left last meeting as well, we were feeling good about D3, and but we must remember this is an advisory commission, and I knew that when I signed up for it, which means that you can do a lot of work and then people can change. But that being said, that is exactly what the Board of Supervisors had voted for. They had two alternatives. One was independent, and then one was an advisory. They chose the advisory. So, like I said, going into the last meeting and leaving, I felt more comfortable with D3 or something close to that. We know there's some modifications with Murata staying in 4. But after watching the comments and ultimately those are the folks that are going to make the decision, especially in the Manteca area, would be Plan E, which I think was a great advent from the staff to come forward based on their recommendations. So like I said, my vote will be based on what I think will sort of fly with the supervisors and still keep all these communities of interest in place and make sure we have the numbers that move forward. But, E is a lot different than D3, but at the same token, it seems to be what the supervisors hinted at, or not even hinted at, said, and that would be, and I'm sure there's going to be some changes once they go to that meeting. But like I say, I think we've narrowed it down, but I think definitely E is the new contender for tonight's meeting, in my opinion. Thank you.
Ms. Panino.
Yeah, I watched the Board of Supervisors meeting, and first I'll say that, like Ann, I think Lodi and Stockton don't want each other equally. Like and dislike at the same time. I was a little bit baffled by some of Rickman's comments, but I would say I want to encourage our committee to stick to what we initially wanted, which is keeping whole, and to the original kind of our ideas and what our goals were for this process. Because I think some of their comments went against what we feel like our, county as a whole needs. And the only thing I don't love about Plan E is that while it does take into account a lot of South County. I think you lose the communities of interest of the farmers and the ag in Escalon and Ripon. They don't have anything. The two are not similar. Tracy is not similar, and we're in a lose-lose situation. At some point, somebody's got to give. Somebody's going to lose. And unfortunately, for District 5, they've had the most growth. So their district naturally and continually over time will lose some parts, because they have the most dense population coming in. That's just the long and the short of it. And so I think E3 addresses as much as we can. I don't think that, in the ideal world, sure, Manteca and Lathrop would be together. But then I think you lose out on other things. So I like D3. It gives more of the South County to them, but then keeps the ag land back and keeps the Delta. So I think you got to play both of all that together.
Yes, Ms. English.
Thank you. Appreciate your input. I like Plan E because of my commissioner here, because Lathrop and Manteca are also growing. So keep that in mind. I mean, it's been in the news, it's been in the Manteca Bulletin, and Lathrop right now is in the process of hiring 24 police. And I know that the fire district for Lathrop and Manteca each have their fire department, but they also cover the outer part and the rural part of Manteca will be the Lathrop fire. So I like the idea of Lathrop and Manteca being together, because as you can see this here, and then Tracy Mountain House eventually will maybe grow together or further out, but Tracy does have a lot of ag, and like to see, I really, after the meeting that we had, and I went back and I reviewed the maps and I kept going over it, that and I believe I even wrote to Mr. Fowler on it, that the meeting prior to this one, I asked where that map was from west to east. So that was my concern at that time too, and it wasn't brought back at our last meeting, but this is similar to it. So I like E. D3 is good, but for me, Plan E keeps Lathrop and Manteca together, and it keeps Tracy and Mountain House together, and still the ag line, ag, our farmland. So I agree with on Plan E. I think it was really well done, considering we didn't even talk about that much on this map. So I support Plan E. And if we have to submit 2 maps, then that would be great, and let them decide.
Hang on one second. Anybody on this side? Yes.
I arrived here tonight under the presumption of what we had kind of agreed at the last meeting at the end, which was that we voted, I think it was unanimous, that we would focus on what is now Plan D, which was, I think, whatever it was at the last meeting, with the corrections that we gave Chris for North Stockton, fixing Pershing, Country Club, all those changes that we gave him. And they came back with 2 good options, I think, for D and D3. And I thought that we were going to narrow it down to a single map, and we were going to kind of decide between the versions of D that arrived. After the Board of Supervisors comments, I think it's clear that we can't follow the plan that we arrived at 2 weeks ago, which is to try to narrow it, like I just said. I think we really have to give them different choices. They asked for it. And I agree with Commissioner Marwood that our job is to kind of come up with our advisory position and advise, but we have to be cognizant of the context within which that advice will arrive. And they're clearly asking for different architectures. I'm not trying to shortcut any process, but I think between D2 and D3, it seems to me there's some sense of unanimity. I also like D3, that if we said between D2 and D3, honoring the process of the last many weeks, we kind of, that procedural, this whole process, I guess is a better way of saying it, we kind of arrived at D3. That's kind of the iteration process that we arrived at. At the end, we see this map E that I think a lot of people like, completely different. I would also recommend Commissioner Mooney's map. I really like it. And I think sending a map that has very balanced districts that keeps together a lot of the values that we arrived at over the last many weeks and gives the board an opportunity to make changes like the one we recommended tonight, the bump country club over, the public comment, include that VRA question and keep district, whatever. But send them a map that we can all agree on is a good map if it was essentially that map, but with a tight tolerance between the districts so that they can move things around. Those are 3 maps. That meets the 3 architecture question that they have. It honors our process with the D map, and it gives them really good options that I think honors and respects everything that we've kind of brought to this process.
Mr. Mooney?
I'd say 3 maps.
Yeah, for one thing is all of the District 1 lines are cutting off the south side of Garden Acres. Here's the line of Mormon Slough, which it cuts off the South Garden Acres area. I mean, that line should go down probably Gillis Road to Farmington and back in. It's a big population area there that all part of the Garden Acres area eliminated. Other than that, the D3 is not bad, except, like you say, if you give it to them, if they want to tweak anything, you're already at the D3 is already a 9.4% deviation. So there's not much wiggle room. So, I don't know. I did that map that I did. I just kind of, let me tweak this thing a little bit. And then one thing what I did was majority of all the West Delta is all in one district. The eastern side of the county, all that ag land is in one district. Manteca, Ripon, Escalon, they're all together. Just kind of, to me, it's more compact than some of these other maps.
Okay. Mr. Grunsky.
Yeah, I'm glad, echoing some comments, glad to see Plan E kind of back in the mix. We looked at a map like this a couple meetings ago, and I think what happened, we looked at the variations of D last, and that benefited from some bias, where a lot of us, when we were looking at a map similar to this, and obviously the supervisors echoed it, we liked it. So I'm glad to see that. I don't have a problem. If they want 3 maps, we could just revolt and send 4 if we want to throw Mr. Mooney's in there, and that could be our, we could do what we want there. But as far as it taking District 5 taking Ripon and Escalon, the majority of your almonds are grown in that South County area of Tracy, Ripon, Escalon. So I like to see that together and have a voice, and I think the Delta having its own voice is good as well. We've had some comments from commissioners that the new commuters in River Islands do want to have some say in the Delta as well. Plan E takes that into consideration as well. It's also, selfishly, that I'm in District 3, it's not that different from our current map. I mean, we've done fine. I've been in the District 3 for a while now with Manteca and Lathrop, but don't mind it at all. And we've had good representation. I like Plan E. I definitely want to send this up if possible. It's up to everyone, obviously, but it's a good enough variation. The feedback, I think that we were led in a direction where this map looks like it could have some favor along with the other ones, and it should definitely be a finalist of what we send up.
Okay. Any other comments? I think it really, at the end of the day, what our responsibility is here is that we're going to ultimately come down to one map that we're going to support. And then from that, we're going to send multiple maps. But I think it's our responsibility that we have to support something. We have to get behind an idea that whatever we feel is best for the county, and making the necessary tweaks. And if it's 2 maps, 3 maps, 4 maps that go, fine, but I think that we should have at least one map that we're going to support and said, hey, this is what we were charged with, this is what you have asked us to do. And, it's just like, to me, if we want to send 4 maps without supporting something, we've just waffled on our job. And, you know, it's important enough that I think that we just need to get behind it and make that decision. You know, we've got the 3 maps that are here that we've got right here, and then we've got Mr. Mooney's, if we want to add that in also for consideration. You know, at the end of the day, when I'm looking at E, and I looked at it, and I don't know how many times, I just look at it from a standpoint that's what it used to be. Saying that, I also realize that a large portion of the growth has come from South County. That's a fact. And it's going to continue to grow. Now, we cannot make that our decisions based on that we're going to see another 15, 20% growth in the next 10 years. Probably will, maybe more, who knows? But I think ultimately at the end of the day, you know, I just have a feeling that Map E, when it goes to the Board of Supervisors, we're going to have a response and saying, oh, wait a minute. We've had Escalon and Ripon in our district for how long? Just like any of the other districts that we're going to have a response from the Board of Supes. And like I said, we were charged with this job, try to make a decision. Ultimately, at the end of the day, we talked about D2 and 3 last time, making the necessary tweaks. Then after the board meeting, from the Board of Supes, they had their ideas, you know, and we should give ourselves some kudos for that, listening to what they had to say and their concerns. They didn't tell us that we had to do that. It was their idea that we had make some changes, and whatever those changes might be. So I'm willing to, at this point, just to get something going, to have the commissioners, and I believe I still have it on, did I still have that on public comment? No, or was it back up here? Okay. So I would say that if we could make a decision on where we're going, what we want to support, and then ultimately start making the tweaks from that, and then, because ultimately we're going to draw some lines. Yes, sir.
So, Chairman, what I'm gathering is you're looking to do some voting.
Well, I'm just looking for a concept that we can all agree that we're moving along in one direction. Ultimately, when we get to making that decision and how we're going to vote, then we've got to go through a particular process that we're going to do. We're going to do a roll call vote, and then we're going to make the decision from there.
So that would be one map at a time, be the way to do that, and then look for consensus. Because I'm looking at the room now, and I have a feeling we're not going to get a 100% vote at this point. So would it be appropriate then to just make a motion to see for approval to make the number 1 map just to see how it goes? I mean, draft map E would go first, or D3, I don't really care, but I have a feeling we're not going to get to any place unless we kind of get a consensus of what people want. I feel like there's a little change. I see some of us agree and some of us don't. But I'm not sure I'm counting correctly.
Ultimately, we're not going to vote on anything yet. I'm just trying to get a consensus of where we're going, on what map that we're going to work with, and before we make the final decision on whether it's going to be D2, D3, E, whatever, Mr. Mooney's, whoever map that we may support, but we're sending whatever the commission wants to do. If it's 2, 3, 4 maps, that's what we're going to send to the Board of Supervisors.
And I just wanted to apologize for, I think I stepped in and derailed public comment from answering a question from the public comment, and I just don't know if we might need to have a little bit more opportunity for people in the room.
Oh, they will have.
Okay.
They will have.
Okay, cool.
Yes, sir.
So I don't have the same hangups of sending several maps. The Board of Supervisors wants some optionality. They gave good feedback. I mean, we're providing the drafts. They're giving us the edit. They're saying what they want. We can give them several different looks and let them decide. Ultimately, it's their decision. I don't necessarily think we can include Mr. Mooney's. We could send all 4 of these up and say, hey, this takes into consideration, and let them decide. Well, I don't necessarily think we have to have any type of unanimous send up one map, especially when if it's D2 or D1, it's very clearly not what several supervisors up there wanted. So we're sending them. If that's the case, we're sending a map that they basically said we don't necessarily want. And it wasn't just Rickman. If you listen to all the comments, I mean, several supervisors had. Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, he was definitely the most vocal. Our poor consultant went to a public execution, was the guest of honor over there. Poor guy.
He's used to it. I've risen from the dead, I guess.
Yeah, you're fine. No, you did great. But I think our job is to take what they said. We want to send one map. I think any map but E does not take into consideration their comments. So if we want to send more maps, that's fine with me. They did ask for some optionality. Even in private conversations, that's what we disclosed. The question was, is there one map or is there 3 maps? My answer was not sure. We're going to find out. So,
okay. Yes, sir.
I feel like there is consensus among many of the commissioners that differs with what you're saying. I think you seem to have, and I just want to really flesh this out to make sure that I'm clear about what your direction is as our chair. You really feel strongly that we should vote on a singular map as the flag bearer for this commission's work, and that it would be an abrogation of our responsibility if we sent just kind of like 4 maps. We just said, well, we all like these 4 maps, let's just send them, gavel it out, let's go home early. That I want to be clear, you think that would be a bad decision?
Personally, this is only my opinion, that we select the one map that we feel very comfortable about, very strong about. We did that the last time. We pretty much had an idea that we were behind D2 last time. And then until it got to the Board of Soups, and then they took a look at that and were not satisfied with that.
So I had a follow-up to my comments when you're done.
So I just think that I would just like to see one map that we support.
So with that in mind, would you be okay with something that we don't do in our normal democracy? We have a one person, one vote kind of idea. But I think if we took maybe a 5 or 10 minute recess and each commissioner could order these 4 maps, and then we simply compiled the vote, I think you'd get a winner. You'd get some priority would come out of that. In other words, I don't think we're going to get 10 yes votes on any one of these maps.
We don't need 10 yes votes.
Correct.
We need is a majority.
The problem is we have 10, and we could end up with 5-5 on a number of these maps, and I think that's the issue. That's what I'm concerned about, is if we went through and said, let's vote on each map, do you like this map or not, we might end up with just as much of a mess as we're in now in terms of a muddled story. So if each person went through and said, well, I know which one I like the most, but rank them, something like a ranked choice kind of a deal, which is goofy, but it might give us a chance to say, look, everyone's top vote, there are seven people's top vote is the same. So that's maybe a way to get at this consensus that you're seeking.
Yeah. I'm going to go to council. Do you have any input of where we're at right now with the comments?
I think from a legal perspective, the one thing I would put into context here is that the Elections Code does require or gives you the discretion and the power to recommend, it says, a map to the Board of Supervisors. The counties however, have a consensus, and this has been vetted, is whether we think under the interpretation of the Fair Maps Act, which remember is new, whether that does allow an advisory committee like yourselves to put forward more than one map, and there is a consensus among county councils that that is allowed under the elections code, that it says put forward a map, and it does not at all, clarify or limit you from also putting forward a second map and a third map. I think it does appear to, within it, the discretion that it's giving you in its creation of you as an advisory committee, an advisory body, does allow you to say, as a body, we think this is the best way that we can guide you and advise you, Board of Supervisors. So we do expect to see in varying counties potentially more than one map going. We expect to see maybe those maps going in a ranked manner, meaning we are recommending this as our, number one, or number two, or number three. So there is an expectation, especially because they're not cases interpreting the Fair Maps Act. The Fair Maps Act allows that kind of creativity, right? That kind of, this is what we think is best. It gives you discretion. So from a legal standpoint, I think 1 or 2 or 3 is fine. I would say that I think if we start to provide too many, that it does not serve the purpose as intended under the elections code, which really is that you are providing a narrowed guidance to that ultimate legislative body. And I think we do get into a dilution of the expectation when we start to see more and more. Now, again, Fair Maps Act has not been interpreted by case law, which is how we ultimately figure out what an actual codified statute means. But that's kind of where the interpretation is so far. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
So can we possibly vote on these maps and then send it, hey, this is our recommendation, here's a couple maps alongside of it, I think would be a good option that kind of takes everything into consideration, right? That would be a good way to go about it, and just vote on these maps at the top 3 that we've seen here, or?
And that's fine with me.
Okay.
That's fine with me. I just think that we're charged with the responsibility and that we should send one map that we support, and these we're sending along with this, along those lines. Yes, ma'am.
If I may, point of information, any map that you adopt as a body and that you forward to the board under the elections code will be a recommended map. So in that sense, like I said, I think you can rank them or you can send 3 equally, but I don't see under the Fair Maps Act language your ability to send a map that you recommend and 2 others that you categorize differently. And I might be misinterpreting what you're saying, but I did just want to provide that as a point of information.
Well, basically, we could rank them, though, right?
Yes, I think that's acceptable.
So we could
under the
say, for example, if we said D2 is the map that we support, but we're sending E as number 2 and D3 is number 3, we could do that.
Yes, they would just all be identified as recommended maps that are ranked number 1, number 2, and number 3.
So according to Mr. Oster's idea, if we were to take a quick break and Sonia would come through, we'd get some type of an idea of where we stand, and then we can move on from that through that process. Can we do that?
Yeah, you can also send them not ranked, but from a parliamentary standpoint, you, under your rules of procedure, are using Robert's Rules of Order, and I think that does allow for a lot of ways for you to reach consensus to ultimately get to a motion. So I think that's acceptable. The one thing I would note is that when and if you take a recess, if you call that as the chair, that does not allow you to have discussions separately. So it would be something you would task out. You would individually accomplish that, and staff would facilitate that. Okay,
that's very good. So before we do that, I'm going to go back, open up public comment. Anyone in public comment, and I'll come back up to you. Anyone else in public comment? Any questions? Yes, sir.
That was it. The question I had, it was, see if we can stay on District 1. Once you guys vote on your decision on what map, is that something we're going to be able to somehow?
No, we're going to work on that. We're going to work on that.
Oh, okay.
We're just trying to get the consensus of which maps that we're going to work with.
Okay. Yeah, because a lot of the neighborhood came.
Sure. And thank you for coming. I respect that.
Okay.
Okay?
And can I actually ask this gentleman to make sure we have the neighborhood drawn as intended? Okay. So, Mr. Bollinger, the expert in, can you actually put up my screen? Sorry. If we included this portion, I don't know if you can see it, this extension. So below Garden Acres, all tracking 99 down to Arch Road, if that would that include the neighborhood you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay.
Well.
Okay, great. So thank you for that that help. Now we know exactly what we need to look at. So thank you so much for coming.
Sir, before you go back, just so you understand, whatever we do tonight, it's imperative that you contact your supervisor in your area, and I would suggest you attend, and as many folks, I was going to ask you, are these folks all living in the same area? Great. That's exactly how this should work tonight. It shows people that you're interested and want to make sure you stay in that district, but you make sure you continue to go to the next meeting when they actually do the drawing, because we're going to send this over,
Okay.
and he's got your information, and we're going to make sure that you're in that area, but you want to follow through with your supervisor to make sure you speak to him, and then you would want to go to the meeting, and maybe not all the folks, but some of the folks could come, and you could tell everybody, because that was my next question, are these folks with you?
Yes,
that's
they are.
important, because that's a community of interest, and that's what we're here for.
Okay.
Very good.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Any other questions from the audience? Okay, I'll bring it back up front. Any questions here? Yes.
First of all, I'd like to express my support of us putting forward up to 3 maps and that us ranking it, but I think we should recognize that we are recommending all 3. We should be recommending all 3 maps that go forward. Just a small point. Then before we go off and do our own thinking about what of these maps we like the most, I would really like the opportunity to ask some questions about what happened, why D3 looks the way it does and what implications there are on that. Also, of course, hoping that you can, on the fly, incorporate this community of interest that's here represented this evening into District 1, and so we can understand those repercussions on all the maps that we're considering. And then I would like us to spend a few moments looking more at Mr. Mooney's proposed map as well. So I'd like the opportunity to discuss 4.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm just kind of confused on the process of the recess or why we need it. I mean, shouldn't we just discuss everything up here in public if you know, I mean, we're all kind of used to this process in one way or another, and we could just go through these 3 maps, include Mr. Mooney's, make a motion to, those are the maps we are now debating or discussing, and narrow it down to 3, and send one with the recommendation. Is that?
Okay, that's fine with me. Okay. So, do we have you've got some questions on some additional, on the D3?
Yes, I do. My concern in draft D3 is that District 3 feels or looks somewhat disjointed, and whereas in D2 there's, what is this, rule of thumb 5 and Fair Maps Act, that there should be as compact as possible for a district. So I would like to first understand how it ended up with the shape that it did, and then also hear from perhaps someone who is from Manteca to discuss the repercussions of this new shape of District 3.
Sure. So I think to start with, we look at one of the calls was to move District 2's northern border to 8 Mile, right, to encompass as much of or all of North Stockton as possible into the district. So to do that, we had to turn some of these off so that there's not all these lines. We had to, if you remember, this section was not in D2. It was up in D4. So what we had to do is move it north, but also accommodate the population change. So one thing that this plan does is District 4, you can see, is well underpopulated, right? It's negative almost 6%. And that's because all of Stockton's been removed from it. And with so to do that as well, is District 3 needed to move over and encompass the rest of Stockton that couldn't be incorporated into D2. The line is 99 between District 2 and District 3. And so that, except for this little area that moves, that's connected because basically you have this island within northern Stockton. So this is contiguous, more contiguous to this side of Stockton, so we included it on that side. We could always make this diagonal line 99 all the way through and put this chunk over into District 3.
That diagonal line is not 99.
Oh, you're right, it is a 99. That's 99. What is this? Sorry. Been looking at too many. The railroad tracks?
Probably the railroad tracks.
Yeah, it's the railroad tracks. Sorry. Thank you for that correction. So it's the railroad tracks is the dividing line. So we could, again, move this over if we wanted. This portion of northern Stockton that's in D2, we could move it into D3 if we wanted to have that railroad crossing as the boundary. The other thing that we talked about in 2 weeks ago was that we wanted Murata into District 4. And so it really created like binary choices all the way down. You had this area of northern Stockton that we didn't want to put with Lodi and then District 4. And so it connects in a legal way around Stockton, down into French Camp, and into all the way around. And I know it looks, it's long and narrow, but I can bring up thousands of other districts that have met legal standards that do things like track just a freeway for hundreds of miles that connect small outcroppings of population that have met Supreme Court okay. So I think the other element that you bring up is compactness. It's the fifth criteria. It's the least. It's in the ranked order, right? The lowest element in the criteria that we must follow, and the big starred language of it is as much as practical, given the other criteria. So I think with this one, we really have good testimony to create the other districts around it. And so I think we can point to community of interest testimony with pretty much all of these lines. And I think one of the biggest ones is keeping Manteca whole, keeping the VRA district as it is, uniting Stockton into 3 districts rather than 4, which has been in a lot of other maps. And so it checks a lot of boxes, and it's not as compact as it's not perfectly compact, but it's the practical outcome of all these other decisions.
I'd say that quite a number of the points you made regarding D3's District 3 also applied to D2's District 3. But
so I'm going to refer to Mr. Morwitt on the north side of the line, which is the current District 3, and then I'll come back and respond to District 5. Because we're split on Highway 120 currently. On D3. We're talking about Manteca.
are we talking which plan?
No, you can.
Plan D. I was curious about input on District 3 as described in Plan D3 versus D2.
Okay. Okay. Morwit?
Well, going north, I think the biggest change on D3 was taking Murata out and putting that taking Murata and Waterloo and giving that back to District 4. Some people, I see more arguments on the Lodi side saying it has to be back in Lodi. I'm not so sure that's necessarily true. I mean, sure, I guess if you want to bridge it together, but it would still work with the Fair Maps Act as far as continuous shape of it. Compactness, it's narrow, but it's just as long as any other. It's shorter than some of them areas, but I think the biggest change to me, D3 or D2, is quite frankly the E-map, because it brings back Lathrop, and so that's something that this particular area 3 has always had for a number of years. Is that so? I liked it originally, but I didn't get the flavor after watching the supervisor's, comments. But I didn't have a problem with this D2 or D3, quite frankly, the way it worked. I'm not so sure that's what's going to happen.
Mr. Quincy, you had a question that I'll respond to.
I'll be more realistic as far as up north. I don't have a problem with either one of them, actually. It was just more to accommodate District 4. I would have left it. D2 would have been fine with me. Well, and I like the idea that it goes south, which the chairman will discuss.
Mr. Grunsky?
Yeah, District 3 and both the Ds, we're where I currently live in Stockton, we're separated from you guys, that's why I like the E as well. But it, I feel like D3, both the Ds are big changes. And especially with District 3, I think that's the biggest change is District 3. And I brought that up last meeting, is it's like completely changed. And, I don't think we need to do that much moving around if not possible. I know things are going to change, but, less is more in my opinion.
Right.
So your point is that you don't like District 3 as drawn in either Plan D2 or Plan D3 because you don't see the need for such a drastic change. Is that what?
Correct, but also the fact that I'm in District 5 now, which I said last time, I don't have a whole bunch is in common with folk from Tracy as I do from Lathrop and Manteca. And that's just from being a resident, and I think, that's just a personal opinion. That's just from living in the district. I'm not married to any of these ideas. I'm just passing them on.
Gotcha. So, as I took a look at both of these, and initially I felt very comfortable with D2. And, after watching the board, I could understand Mr. Rickman's issues at what we were looking at and not having the ability to have the ag land. It seemed like the ag land just kept diminishing, even though he was picking it up on the Delta side significantly. And, that I looked at that as a big plus, to be very honest. I don't have, when I looked at 3, am I looking at 3? D3, I go back, there's some, Manteca is whole. We're giving up along those lines. Either it's Ripon or Escalon or Lathrop that somewhere along the line that's got to get drawn in because that's where we have a relationship, especially with Lathrop, in today's scene, what we do. And other than that, I don't have a problem with either one of those maps. It's just that back when I looked at 2, it was more of a give and take and said, okay, you want ag land? We can go down south, down to West Ripon Road and everything south to the river county line. That's one aspect to draw it, but realizing that, hey, at the end of the day, that all could change. Like I said last meeting, we could put out the best laid plan that there is, and ultimately there'd be a change to it. Yes, sir.
I just want to clarify one thing between D2 and D3 as it relates to District 3, just to make sure that we're all on the same page and seeing the same thing. In D2, if you look at District 3, it's physically larger, right? It's geographically larger. But if you look at the deviation from ideal, it's actually underpopulated, even though it's geographically larger. It's minus 3.3% in the D2 map. When you tighten it to the smaller geographically shaped District 3 in Plan D3, it actually, because of where the people live and the shape, it's actually overpopulated. And so I just want to make sure we're all on the same line, thinking the same way. Just because the map D3, District 3 looks tinier, it's not smaller. It's actually larger for the factor that we're considering, which is people and voters, well, people. And so it's important to note that if you look at D3 and say, well, I don't want District 3 to be so tiny, well, it isn't. It's actually larger than it is on D3, on map D2. It's actually bigger by a significant amount.
And I would argue that my concern about District 3 on Plan D3 is not so much that it is a smaller footprint, but it stretches into North Stockton a good amount, a population that might not have as much in common as Manteca. Odds are Manteca, as the large city in that district, will have a dominant force in the politics of that district or the issues of that district. So I would, on the theme of making North Stockton as whole as possible for District 2, I don't think either Plan D3 or Plan D2 accomplish that, because a considerable part of North Stockton, east of the railroad, has been given to District 3 in Plan D3.
Does Plan E solve any of those issues for you? Does Plan E solve any of the issues?
Oh, Plan E does. I like Plan E and how it treats North Stockton the most of the others, but that isn't necessarily the only driving factor. There's a lot that I like about Plan E, actually.
And looking at D3, when we talk about deviation, District 4 is a negative 6 point, and they're at only barely 146, versus the other two were above. Everybody has 150 and above. And District 4 is actually in the negative point, and that was one of the questions I had on that too, because we're looking at numbers, right, and trying to be fair about it, and D3 actually takes away the population from 4. And pretty much balance.
I would kind of argue the flip side of what Pam was saying of, North Stockton, the North Stockton part of the D3 plan, them not having as much in common with Manteca. Well, I don't think Ripon and Escalon have much in common with Tracy. So, I think you're always going to, again, I go back to my point of there's always going to be somebody to lose. And how can we say one community is more important than another community of interest? Every community of interest must be equally as important. And I don't know.
Point well taken. Taken. Yes, ma'am.
I'm with Summer on that one. Also looking at between D3 and E, in D3, North Stockton goes into District 3 on the east, and on Plan E, North Stockton goes into District 3 on the west. So you still have a little bit of Stockton being sort of out there, and Manteca is going to be the one that makes the decision. So,
And actually, and if you look at Plan E, I think that there's part of Stockton 4 districts.
Yeah.
Because there's part in 4,
Yeah.
2, 3,
Yeah.
and 1.
Yeah. And, you know, and some of the people's complaints is you don't want Stockton to overpower your agricultural districts, so try and keep it more compact in its own district, and, you know, but it's hard because there are too many people in Stockton, so.
I would also not argue, but bring up to the point that generally speaking, our county has been blessed to have great leadership that takes care of the county as a whole.
Yeah.
So we're really so focused on the districts, but so many times you call the person that you know the best, or you know somebody who knows somebody that can make the call to get you the help you need. Generally speaking, our county, I would say, is very blessed that they work together well to try to get things accomplished as for the county as a whole. I think in some cases that might not be the case, but we are so focused on that, whereas I really feel like, yes, you are representing your district, but you're also representing the county.
As a whole, yeah.
So I think that maybe we need to lessen the hardcore focus and say, really, yes, you represent certain communities of interest, but really you represent everybody. You can get a call from anybody.
Very true. Any other questions on this side? Okay, did you have another question?
Hey, let's look at the Mr. Mooney's map.
Okay, let's take a look at Mr. Mooney's plan.
So, believe that this is Mr. Mooney's amended plan, 7882. So I think the differences from the D series is the way, well, you already pointed out one, Country Club, right, is not unified. This uses, I believe, Highway 5 on the western border. You have northern Stockton and western Stockton unified with Lodi. That's a different architecture. Actually have the area that the public, I can't remember the gentleman's name, I'm sorry, but that neighborhood is incorporated. You see Arch Road at the south. It's incorporated into District 1. Also, I think there is a...
So that adjustment has been made?
In this map, yes. I think one of the elements is would need to double check, but I believe that this tracks river and part of Lathrop is split off. It's a very small portion. But this portion of Lathrop, I believe, split. So I think this is almost ideally balanced. So I think we have the ability to make sure Lathrop is whole into District 5. I was looking at, this is very densely populated, the Country Club area. So might have to, that would be one area that I think would be, you have to look at specifically. But again, Manteca's whole, Tracy and Mountain House are together. You got the Delta District, right, with Lodi and North and Western Stockton. And it does have this element where District 3 has both sides of kind of Stockton, but on the north side. But I think with this plan too, you only have Stockton in 3 districts.
Map up, please.
Oh yes. Sorry.
The one thing that I see that I have a problem with on this particular map is the fact that when we start and splitting Linden, Campo, all that northern area with Lodi, because to me that all those are the hubs of the agricultural area that we've talked about from the onset, that we were trying to keep together. And I think it was 2 meetings back when we talked about trying to keep that part of the agricultural package intact.
I think it doesn't. That 4 covers what I was after was covers the majority of all that ag on the east side of the county. As, tried to split off Lodi proper, but most of the east side, all the ag is together.
The thing about it, when you get just above that or down below it, all the way to the county line, you have a lot of ag land, and that's now moved into vineyard.
So, Steve, can you amplify? You're saying that the communities of Victor and Lockford and east of Lodi have more in common with Lodi because of the vineyard basis for agriculture. I would say, though, a plus of this granted somewhat artificial division of the agricultural region in our county is that it does create 2 strong agricultural districts. This east district, I forget what number it is, green, and the west district that has Lodi as the center.
And doing a little math provided by Mr. Bollinger, if we wanted to move, I'm saying 1,000 people in Kohlerville to keep it whole, 2,500 people in Dogtown, 314 people in Victor, and 3,340 people in Lockford. That's roughly 7,174 people, which would be a basically 4% shift. So one would go up by 4, one would go down by 4. So the total deviation would result in around 8%. So that would be a legal map. I'd like to check it by drawing it, but if that was something you guys wanted to contemplate, I think it's a possible shift. Yeah.
Up just a little bit.
The merit I see of this idea of this, if we could be so bold as to call it a reverse 7, this 3 being bent this way, if we move Dogtown, Victor, Collierville into District 3 from this map, the merit there is that I think with the current District 4, the way it's drawn, Manteca is going to so dominate just by population, followed by Ripon and Escalon, that these northern communities really would, I think, be challenged to exert influence over whomever results as the supervisor, that by pushing them into District 3 instead and making whatever accommodations, if any, are needed to balance, it would make them more likely to be included in the area of influence of Lodi in a way that they presumably share some values and interests. That seems to me to be a good thing. If we started with Mooney's map and did that reverse 7, you might actually benefit that a community by separating it away from Manteca, I guess is my point.
Chairman.
Yes, ma'am.
This is my least favorite map. No offense, Mr. One, because I think it splits a lot of the communities of interest of the wine grape, which is very important, as with all ag in our county. But it also pins a lot of Stockton, the northern part, and splits Stockton into 3. And one of the overarching goals, again, of our committee was that we wanted it to be 2 primarily. And so I just...
Yeah, I don't, I appreciate the time, but I don't remember the saying, but it's like, used an axe instead of a scalpel. It's maybe it's so different from what we've been seeing and discussing that it's a little bit of a shock to the system, but especially having these maps. So it's not my favorite. I think the other 3 have more merit.
Okay.
Oh, do we have more?
Pardon? Oh, Ms. Tybeck?
Miss, I was just going to say that the map I submitted looked a whole lot like this, full disclosure. So I actually kind of like this, so long as the vineyard ag is able to be incorporated a bit more, and I'm not convinced that that is possible. Another big plus is I really like District 1, that incorporates that larger community of interest that our large constituent group came to talk about today.
Mr. Morwick?
So that's what I just wanted to ask that before I went on. So I think we've come to a crossroads here. So I'd like to, make a motion that we, vote on one of the maps. At this point, I think we've asked a lot of questions. I think that some of the concerns of the community of interest that came in a few minutes ago, that could be, I think, easily worked on. If that's our only concern at this point. But I think we should probably get going here and start ranking them. So we do as a supervisor did ask for like 3 maps or whatever you like. But I'd like to see some type of a vote come down.
So are you ready to make a motion?
I'm making a motion that
we... hang on. Motion. Or you make a motion. Okay, let me read this first. It says, basically I'm asking, can I get a motion to recommend the supervisor district boundaries identified in map, whatever map that is, to the Board of Supervisors with any de minimis technical changes that staff deems necessary. So I'm going to call on our legal expert to explain the definition of de minimis. No, it won't take 45 minutes. Your attorney?
Oh. And actually, we do have one printed. It's an explanation. So we're going to hand that out, and then I'll also give one. I have been instructed I'm not allowed to do explanations by any kind of dance or anything fun, so I'll just sort of explain it. I know, no fun. So in short, what this is this would allow you to say the map that we visually see represented is what we want to be recommended to the board, but staff then will have the ability to clean up some items. So the way that we have described that specifically is that de minimis technical changes would only include insignificant, so significant in the statistical sense, but include insignificant changes to aspects of the district lines within the mapping software. So the mapping software that you've seen, we have census tract data that's overlaid, and then we have been mapping by those blocks. But those census data blocks sometimes include small slivers of land that do not match existing features. So for example, a road or a river. The district block may not be a straight line as we envision, for example, a road. So as it zigzags or creates slivers that don't match the existing boundaries, while your intention visually is to utilize that road or river or feature that you're familiar with in your community, since the district block may not match that, by making the motion and allowing this de minimis technical changes, you are allowing staff to clean up that line to be simple and match what you have understood it to be simple and intuitive without significantly affecting population. If any of these slivers do have population, de minimis technical changes cannot include more than 0.01% of the population, which is about 15 people. So if it's approximately that or lower, we're going to allow that. By creating that motion, you're allowing that. If it's more than that, it's not de minimis. Then it's changing the population, and it's clearly not what you intended. So that's why we're asking for that to be added to your motion. I would also clarify the chair has been provided sort of a template motion, which he just read, and that does include that allowance for technical, de minimis technical changes. So that's the explanation of that. You can also, of course, in your motion say, I would like to see map X with this specific change, and that can also be part of your motion. That's not part of the template, but of course you each, in understanding your rules, know that you have some flexibility in that motion. So I did give the example, for example, a road or a river. If you do want more details or more places we might see it, Dave Bollinger is really the expert on this, and I'll tell you, he really gave me kind of a technical aspect, so I understood that, and of course that's absolutely his wheelhouse. Does anybody have any questions about that?
Any questions?
Okay. So I want you to understand the reason for it, and then I want you to understand the limited change that would be, and it is within the software that you're looking at.
Okay. Mr. Morwood.
I would put a motion forward as to get a consensus for our motion for map E, but putting in so we get this in there, that the community of interest that wanted to be included in District 1 could be put in that map as well. And I would probably do that with all three of them as well, so that, because it's not a huge number and I think it could be worked in. But I think I have to put that in the motion, County Council, so that they could put that in there as well.
My pen. Yes, that's a great example. So for example, yes, that was a good example in that. And then, and of course, under Robert's Rules of Order, that would be considered, discussed, voted on, and then someone could make another motion. But that's a good example.
So my motion would be to bring forth the preferred map of E with the community of interest that was here earlier to put their small area in District 1.
We have a second.
A second.
Okay, it's been properly moved and seconded to move item E, map E, forward with the COI on that included with District 1, to include into District 1. Did I say that correctly? Roll call vote, please. Yes, sir.
Yeah, on adding that community of interest, are you also including the South Garden Acres area? Which it's kind of contiguous with that other area south of Mariposa. But
I think if this basically it would incorporate all the way down to the Stockton border.
So basically, you'd more or less follow the lines that.
No. The answer is yes. I believe that the public comment specifically referred to the area between Mariposa and Arch. So this also includes, as drawn currently, the area south of Mormon Slough there down to Mariposa. So a bit larger than the public comment, but certainly including the area of the public comment.
Okay.
Chair, can I make a comment, please?
Yes, sir.
I want to be clear about Robert's rules and make sure that everybody's aware and make sure that I'm aware. I'm actually asking you for clarification. The motion that Commissioner Mormont has made is binary, and it is ordered. By that I mean, if we agree with his motion that we want E to be the map, then we are saying that's it, that's the map. There cannot be a subsequent motion for a different map that would supersede it unless we all agreed to that. In other words, we're not saying, do we like E? Yes, I like E. Okay, let's vote on the other one. Okay, I like that one too. And then there's some later process. This is the process. This is the motion that if you agree that E should be the one primary and one map, you're disregarding D2, D3, or Mooney's map or any other map, That's it. That's the one that we are agreeing is the map. If we decide to include the other maps, we can. That'd be a separate motion. But the consequence of this vote is we're picking E, and that's it.
Mr. Kwong.
Thank you, Chair and Committee. So the motion gets second. You can always vote in make a motion for a substitute motion. And I believe you act on the substitute motion first before you go back. And then if that fails, then you go back to the original motion.
Okay.
And then barring a substitute motion.
That's correct. So at the time, should you get a second, somebody can make a substitute motion.
Hang on one second. Yes, ma'am.
Through the chair, if there was a consensus that you intended to do a series of motions and that there was a consensus that you're dealing with one map and then you will deal with the next map, I would make sure that that's discussed and clarified, but that would be in alternative to a substitution process that you would be doing, let's vote on this map, and there would be an action, and then you would move to the subsequent expected actions that were created by consensus.
So if we were to make that clear in the initial motion, that we were going to look at the other two maps in succession, whatever they might be, and make that determination. Because we don't know, we could vote on this, and we could be 4-5, for example. And then we're going to bring something else up, D2 or 3, and we find out, okay, that has 8-0, 8-1, whatever. So ultimately, I'm assuming that's where we were going.
Yeah, so I would amend then my first motion to say I would like to bring forth 3 maps, beginning with map E with the community of interest of District 1, and then I guess we'll go for a vote on that, and then after that, then go to D, my next map and my next. That would be, that's how I was writing it down.
I think that would establish that you would be expecting more than one set of actions, and it wouldn't end the actions.
And so at the end of the evening, when we look at those 3, ultimately the map that has the most votes is probably going to be the one that's going to be presented as the one that the commission is.
My comments are only as to the question presented in terms of the emotion. So in order to garner consensus, the best way to garner consensus is through a motion. So you could either do a preliminary motion and say, we're going to vote on 3 maps, or alternatively, like Mr. Morowit has raised, you could get that consensus through that first motion. That would then set up the expectation that there would be 3 as opposed to kind of a gotcha of, it's just one map. You know.
Gotcha, okay.
So.
And the intention of my motion is to bring forth 3 maps, all including the community of interest of District 1, and then at the end, we'll know what each vote was, and then we'll present that. That'll be presented to the Board of Supervisors, and then they can make their own decision based on that, obviously.
Mr. Grensky, are you okay with the second on that?
Yeah, I'm okay with second. I'm really glad I didn't make the motion. That got really complicated, so I'm glad I'll just follow along, but holy smokes.
Now you have a clear second as amended.
Sure.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So I'd like to clarify what our end goal is. Are we, in this process, which is rather convoluted, we will likely end up with one map that gets the majority of votes. That does not give us, and then we could go down in order, perhaps, with ranking the top 3.
Correct.
It's quite possible that the way the voting goes, that it won't be clear how the committee feels about which map should be ranked second or third, which goes back to Michael's recommendation early on that each of us think about what rank order do we want, and then we could potentially tally that. That's sort of a university way, not a Robert's Rules of Order way, and then the numbers would fall out in that map.
A friendly amendment to Commissioner Morowitz's motion would be that if we could potentially modify his existing current motion in the form it currently is in to say, let's vote whether we have a preference. So it's not necessarily a motion that would carry the weight of a decision, but rather you're proposing we look at map E. I think everyone should just vote, do I like this or not? And so we're really just saying a preference vote for whether we prefer this map or not. Do you like it, yay or nay? Not whether do you want it to be the map that goes, but do you like it or not? And then we would do that in sequence for the other maps that are on the paper that we were presented. And then at the end of the 3 yay nays preference vote of the 3, we could see what the numbers are. And if one of the 3 gets 8 or 9 votes, then we could have a motion at that point, a second motion at that point that would say, now that we see what everyone's preference is in, now let's do the motion that I thought you were doing at the beginning, which is, now let's do a real motion. This is the map. This is the one primary map. But we would have the information of everyone's preference before we did that, so that we could see, okay, yeah, there was one map that had 8. Maybe we could just wrap that into the beginning and say, well, if one map gets, but that gets tricky because then there's judgment.
Can we just vote to move these 3 maps forward?
That's what I was
as
trying
finalists, as the finals of the ones we aren't going to look at any other maps, and then we could vote on those individually and go through that. Is that what you're thinking?
that was what I was going to do.
So we're just going to say, hey, we're fine with these 3 being our finalists to be discussed, continue to be discussed up in the next.
That is the motion, correct?
As a motion.
Okay. Roll call vote, please.
E.
Pamela Ibeck,
Nay.
Alice English,
Yes.
Ann Baird,
No.
Bob Mooney,
No.
James Grunsky,
Yes.
Mike Morowit, Mitchell Oster, Oscar Valdez, Oscar Valdez, Oscar
Yes, I'm here.
Valdez.
Yes, I had a problem with my mute. So I say yes.
Summer Panino, Steve DeBrum,
Yes. Results, please.
5-5.
I do believe my vote's 2. No? I'm just this is a joke.
That's the way it works. So that's what I believe should be reported
Can I make a motion?
for that particular map.
I would like to make a similar motion constraining only 2 maps, D2 and D3. That I don't know what this commission would want to do between D2 and D3. I think they're very similar, obviously, and I feel as though if we could agree, I don't know, I am suspecting that the inclusion of E in the previous motion is why it did not garner majority support. So I believe a consensus position might be that if we did a similar vote, do we want to consider D2 and D3 as the 2 maps, and then we could rank them in a subsequent motion? So very similar to the motion we just did, but excluding E from that consideration. That only D2 and D3 were considered, with the de minimis and with the making sure that the COI District 1 is included, which I believe it already is, as drawn. Is there a second?
Yes, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor to accept both D2, D3, and to vote on that, and then we'll proceed from there and then see where we might rank them after that on the subsequent motion.
Clarification, we're going to vote on D2 and D3.
Yeah, the motion is to, if you say yay, you're saying we're going to restrain our submission to the Board of Supervisors to just D2 or D3, and that we would, subsequent to this motion, to this vote, would rank them after the fact.
You have a
So
question?
we have a discussion.
So it excludes E, and it moves it just to D2 and D3.
Okay, just item, yes, ma'am.
I will argue that by D2 and D3 plans are similar, And I would think that it's our responsibility as an advisory committee to choose one or the other if we're going to submit a plan D2 or D3 to the supervisors.
And this motion would allow for that to happen subsequent to this vote.
The way I interpret that motion is that because I think we should make a choice between these two, I would vote nay on that motion.
Just to clarify, I want to make sure I'm explaining the motion clearly. I'm suggesting that this vote, this roll call vote that we would do next, you would say if your preferred map is included in D2, D3, you would say yay. Then, if we were to get a majority vote on D2 or D3, then after that, you could express your preference. There would be a subsequent vote. We would pick a preference between D2 and D3. So this is not excluding that preference that you're seeking. It's inclusive of that. I'm actually wanting the same thing you are. I'm only trying to move us forward by narrowing the maps to ones that I believe will garner consensus. I don't know. I have no idea what the result of this roll call would be.
Chairman?
Yes, sir.
I don't actually disagree with. We are tasked here to come up with. We preferred a couple of weeks ago to have one map. That was our goal. The meeting came. The supervisors they explained they wanted more. They wanted 2, 3 maps. That was explained. The supervisor I spoke to was, I believe, Mr. Grunsky, had the same conversation similar to this. I think we've all want some choices. All I was trying to do was just let them know what we came up with. I think we should proceed with my original motion to vote on D2, D3, and if it comes out 5-5 again, 5-5 again, 5-5, then that is the way it is, because that is the will of this commission or advisory. I don't really want to guess what it's going to be. I think we need to follow through. I started with the motion. I think I should finish the motion, and if somebody wants to come up with another motion after, that's fine. But we voted on E. I'd like to now have a motion to vote on D2.
So, actually, we have a motion from Mr. Lester.
Actually, Chair.
Is that a substitute?
Before that motion, you probably should have a motion on extending the meeting time.
Yeah, we have a motion on the floor.
Okay.
Once we do that, then we'll come back to extend the meeting.
To include D3, I would retract and support D2 as the motion, as a motion to support D2 and only D2 going forward. I support Morowitz, and so I withdraw my motion if I can. Am I allowed to withdraw? I can withdraw because this is actually my preferred outcome. I was trying to get us there, but if we want to jump forward to D2, I'm for it.
Okay. The motion has been withdrawn. Mr. Morowitz, before we go there, now that we have no motion on the floor, may I have a motion to extend the meeting, please?
So moved.
So moved.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Same sign. Motion carries. Now, Mr. Morowitz.
So I was going to go through D2, and then when that's done, go to D3.
Okay, so your motion is to consider D2 and then D3. Okay.
Seconded.
The subsequent motion. And you were like a deer in the headlight that you've got that look.
This is why I don't play poker. Through the chair, if I may clarify the motion. Just to clarify, and I just want to understand this is to further consider the motion, and ultimately there'll be a second motion for a recommendation.
No, it's a new motion from Mr. Morowitz.
Thank you for the clarification.
Okay, so we will consider D2 and then come back with a subsequent motion to consider D3. Is that correct?
Correct. With all including the community of interest and district.
Okay, and do we have a second?
Seconded.
Okay, roll call, please.
Yes.
Alice English,
No.
Ann Baird,
No.
Bob Mooney,
No.
James Grunsky,
No.
Mike Morowitz,
No.
Mitchell Oster,
Yes.
Oscar Valdez,
No.
Summer Panino, Steve DeBrum,
No. Motion fails, vote 8-2, correct?
Yes.
Okay, now we will consider D3. That we will have to have another motion to, and then, okay, may I have a motion, Mr. Morwitt?
D3?
D3, and with the same thing,
Seconded.
Consideration of the COI on 1.
Oh, yes.
Okay, and
Seconded.
it's been properly moved and seconded. Now, roll call, please.
I'm sorry, who first and second?
Mr. Morwitt was first, Mr. Oster was the second.
Thank you. Pam Ibeck,
Yes.
Alice English,
No?
Ann Baird,
Yes.
Bob Mooney,
Yes.
James Grunsky,
No.
Mike Morowit,
No.
Mitchell Oster,
Yes.
Oscar Valdez.
No.
I'm sorry? Oscar Valdez.
Oscar, please repeat your vote, yes or no?
Oh, I can't hear. But I say no.
Summer Panino. Steve DeBrum,
Yes.
6-4.
Map D3 passes 6-4. Okay. So we have a map for consideration under D3. That's my understanding, correct? Yes, ma'am.
I would like us to take action regarding Mr. Mooney's map. We spent a considerable time discussing it. I think it's worth a vote to make sure that we
Okay.
have clarity. Okay, so I have to make the motion to
Yes.
consider whether we want to go forward and consider Mr. Mooney's map.
Okay.
Clarification, is that also, is there a District 1 issue on map 1?
No, his map actually incorporates the District 1 issue.
Okay.
Is there any chance that we could see the map on our screens before we move forward with this vote? And when you say, I just want to clarify, Commissioner Ibeck, when you say Mooney's map, you mean the one that's been modified tonight to include the COI because it didn't originally. Beginning of the night, it didn't, and then we had a modified Mooney, which I think Chafee.
Well, no, this is his, sorry, this is his second map.
And that did
this
it,
is,
did inclusive of the COI?
Yeah, it's.
The public comment COI?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify.
It's up on your screen.
Officer, do you have any questions? No. Yep. Okay. Roll call, please. This is on Mr. Mooney's map. It has been moved for consideration. Yes, ma'am.
My apologies, but we did discuss a modification for Mr. Mooney's map, and that was to incorporate as much of the communities east of Lodi as possible, or to provide a continuity of the agricultural community related to vineyards.
So I have a point of clarification.
Yes.
Could you incorporate it into your motion, or if this works, one element would be you could move Murata to balance population. You're moving Dogtown, Kohlerville, Victor, and Lockford into 3. You could move Murata over into District 4 to balance population. if it would be required to be compliant.
I would support that as part of the motion.
Thank you.
Okay, and who was the second? Was that Mr. Morwitt? Were you the second? Do you agree with that, sir? On the necessary moves?
Oh, absolutely. That's what we talked about.
Okay.
That was the last amendment.
Any other questions? Any other questions? Roll call, please.
Sam Ibeck,
Yes.
Alice English,
No.
Ann Baird,
No.
Bob Mooney,
Yes.
James Grensky,
No.
Mike Morowit,
No.
Mitchell Oster,
Yes.
Oscar Valdez, Oscar Valdez,
Yes.
was that a yes?
Yes.
Summer Panino, Steve DeBrum,
No. Motion does not pass. 6-4. Okay. So we have, at this time, one map for consideration to go to Board of Soups, which is map D3.
No, right, but then the other two maps are included. We're just giving them the vote that we had.
Okay.
On that.
Thank you.
Because that's what they wanted. They wanted to know, and that's what it came out. The vote on each map, so, which will be, there'll be 3 maps considered. Mr. Mooney's did not pass. Only one.
Did he?
We're going to have some clarification on what the motion was. There should almost be a second motion of sending all 3 of these up with the votes, right? Is that possible that we could send all, or those 2 up that passed for consideration? So therefore, you would have.
Only one passed.
Through the chair, if I may.
Yes, ma'am.
The first motion was very muddied, and it included 3 for consideration. That motion failed, and then what you did was do a motion for further consideration by the RAC on each individual map. As my notes tell me, the one of those that passed was D3. But what you didn't do in the individual votes was to address E a second time.
That's right.
So that one has not been, no one has moved to further consider E. So I'm just raising that as, that's what my notes say, whatever you opt to do on that. Secondarily, my understanding of the motion that did pass was that the RAC would further consider map D3. And if you took the same action for E, what you would be doing is you would be, if it mirrored the other motions, the action would be this group would further consider that map. After those 2 motions, what you would have before you would be the 2 maps that you took a motion and voted to further consider, E3, and if you opted to do E as well. My understanding is after discussion, or maybe my hope would be, that then there would be a motion to recommend one or both of those maps, and it is at that time that I would ask you to include the de minimis technical changes, because that would be the vote where we would be moving it to the board, and we would need that ability to make those technical changes. That's my understanding, and I'm sort of conveying to you what my notes are telling me.
Okay.
That was my intention in the beginning, and then when Mr. Oster made that secondary motion, which is fine, I was just continuing that on to basically, at the end of 3, just rank them as they were. That was the idea of doing the vote on each one, was to see what the ranking is and what it came out to. If one was the majority, which D3 was, that would be the number 1. Next one was D2, to be number 2, and then if E was the one that was the least, it would be number 3. But either way, the supervisors would have 3 choices, and we could put that, I know what you're asking for at the end. You wanted this technical to be in there for all 3 of them.
Just the words, not the definition. I may have, I believe for purposes of the record, that first motion became so convoluted, not by anyone's fault, that it was difficult, I know, for me to track, and therefore I have concerns about how that would appear in the record as tracking. So I would ask through the chair that we revisit that, because, and it might just be that I just was unable to track that. But again, I would ask that we reconsider that, because it appears that there's consensus to do a maps we are going to consider and then to take a secondary action. But I don't believe it was clear as to map E. So if we could clarify that.
We would have a motion for E to re-vote on E again. To be included with the other 2 maps.
The other one.
Okay.
Could you just state the motion clearly? So you are moving to ask that the map E with the added community of interest to be added to District 1 be further considered by the RAC.
Correct.
So if you would make that motion, that would be great, or so move.
I feel like I've done it twice, but anyway.
I just want it really, really clear, and I apologize.
I understand. So my motion would be to reconsider map E with the community of interest in District 1. That would be my motion, to reconsider that map.
We have a second?
Second.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
What does it mean to reconsider?
Taking a vote again.
Point of clarification. E has only been voted on once, and it was a 5-5 tie, and it was when it was included with, it was the original motion, which was included with D2 and D3. I made a subsequent motion for just D2 and D3 because I presumed that E was the one that sank your original motion, which didn't reach a majority as a motion, so it failed. So it was like it didn't happen. So we never actually considered E singularly by itself, as we did with subsequent motions. And so I believe, and Chair and our legal counsel, if you could confirm this, it is my understanding that we voted individually on all the other maps that are here tonight. The only one that reached more than a 50-50 vote, or 6 or more votes in favor of, was D3. You are asking that we consider E to possibly be included with D3 as a second map that we would go forward moving to consider. It sounds like you're also saying a different thing, which is that you want all the maps to just go, and I want to be really clear that council made it abundantly clear to us that we have a responsibility to limit the number of maps.
Agreed.
And so by virtue, is my understanding, and please, if the commission feels differently, please speak up now. It was my understanding that as we voted on these to consider them, and as they were failing, so D2 failed badly, 8-2, and I think Commissioner Mooney's didn't reach over 50-50, that we are not considering those any longer, and those 2 maps have died. They won't go to the Board of Supervisors. That's my understanding of how we voted. Now, maybe I'm wrong about that, but I just want to clarify that.
So, Ms. Sybeck.
As part of this discussion, I want to say that I will not be supporting your motion, because a motion I think we should take is formally say we want to put forward maps E and D3.
We have to vote on E.
But
I thought we did
because I thought it stayed alive to consider, and I guess it gets down to, is a tie a fail or a tie?
Yes.
Yeah.
Could have been an odd number committee.
So can I make a friendly motion in support of?
One second here. So I think there was some confusion, Ms. Sybeck, with you were voting on almost as the final one. You weren't interested in E being the final thing sent, but she was interested in it being sent up as part of a package. Okay, and then there's confusion on that now, right? So that's where, so she voted against, which she was voting as an independent against D. Okay, we know what I'm talking about, right? I think that's the head nod I gave, so I'm just going to point to you because the camera's on. But we need to make it a motion where
Included.
exactly D2 and E go up. Then we single it out from there. Between those two, battle it out, right? Is that where we're at now?
For the
At
record,
D3, one of the Ds.
for the record, since it was my vote that made it tied, and James Grunsky is speaking for me, I think I should speak to say I agree with what he said. I voted nay for E because it was not my first choice. But I was assuming that we would come back and revisit because I feel that E should be put forward.
But just to clarify, we can do that now. We can do a motion. You can make a motion to consider E along with D3, which reached majority support. And I think we can do it as a separate vote on E alone, and that gets us out of the woods here.
And let me just say, to add to the confusion, because I looked at it that we never voted on 3. We put E as part of the package of the 3 maps, 2, 3, and E. We never said. So we never actually voted on E to bring that back. We killed it right there.
That wasn't the intention.
If I can just clarify through the chair, I think that original motion became so convoluted that we do not have a clear record on what that first motion is. And that motion did include E, and E wasn't then later addressed in any motion. My understanding. And certainly I am not comfortable with that first motion as being one that I could follow. I think it got super convoluted. That included 3 maps. And I'm not contradicting anybody's statement. I'm just adding that clarification. I do not believe that E's been considered. As I understand what the motion that's currently on the floor is to reconsider, and I may ask you to consider amending that word, but is to further consider map E by the RAC tonight.
More, we're trying to move upward. It's just
But I think that's the same thing. I think this is where we're getting confusion, is us choosing to move it up to the Board of Supervisors. That's what we're deciding on. What are we moving up? So the only one that's so far reached a majority or passed as a motion is D3. That's the only one that we've had a motion that says, should we send this up? Yes, it passed. All the other ones have failed. So the truth is right now, the only motion that really matters is that we have a motion that passed for D3. After that, everything's basically off the table. If Commissioner Ibeck wants to include map E to also be included with D3 when it goes up, that's a motion that someone can make and we can vote on it, for sure.
So back, so then the goal was to give 3 maps to the supervisor. That was my goal in the original motion. Obviously, that got too convoluted and there was a lot of conversation. That's fine. We're going to move on now. The motion is to now vote for consideration on map E with the community of interest in District 1. Move it forward with the other, with D2 as well. D3 as well. And so that's my motion to vote on E. Reconsider, not reconsider, a full motion on E to move it forward to the supervisors, upward.
Been properly moved and seconded to elevate E
Just E.
for consideration. Okay? Are we good?
I recommend that you vote on that map. My one, I think you should take this vote. I think we have used considerations differently through the series of motions. And I think Commissioner Oster may be the one who can explain that, because I think the way you put it forward originally was that this body would consider it. And then what we will do is the formal motion to recommend it to the board. And at that point, I have some specific language I'd like considered. So if this motion is consistent with how you've used consider on D3 and on the other maps, then consider means by the RAC with a secondary vote to recommend to the board. So long as we're all understanding that we're using that consideration in the same way, I would appreciate that clarification before the vote on the motion that's currently pending and seconded.
Okay. Roll call vote, please.
Pam Ibeck,
Yes.
Alice English,
Yes.
Ann Baird,
No.
Bob Mooney,
Yes.
James Grunsky,
Yes.
Mike Morowit,
Yes.
Mitchell Oster,
No.
Oscar Valdez,
Yes.
Summer Panino,
No.
Steve DeBrum,
Yes.
7-3.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
I would like to make a motion, Mr. Chair, that we forward to the Board of Supervisors the two maps that received maps E and D3.
Seconded.
With the caveat of the de minimis line changes. And
Seconded.
Also the correction of the COI.
with a correction of the community of interest.
Any questions? Any discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Pam Ibeck,
Yes.
Alice English,
Yes.
Ann Baird,
Yes.
Bob Mooney,
Yes.
James Grunsky,
Yes.
Mike Morowit,
Yes.
Mitchell Oster,
Yes.
Oscar Valdez,
Yes.
Summer Panino,
Yes.
Steve DeBrum,
Yes. Okay, is there, now, do we need to rank these two?
Pardon?
Do we need to rank them? That's just a question.
That is absolutely up to the RAC and within the RAC's discretion. Under the Elections Code, I believe you are able to do that, but it is wholly up to the RAC.
Motion that we submit them with equal
Okay,
weight.
is there any, is that the consensus, that we not rank them? Okay? All right. Not going to rank them. Okay. So, public comment. Anyone have public comment? And we are, and I know we talked about this. I just want to assure that everything is taken care of properly for District 1 and the COI as we continue to move through there, and for the area of the de minimis technical changes that are required. Okay? Anything else? Any questions?
At what point will these maps, corrected maps, be online?
Yeah. Okay.
Question?
Yes, ma'am.
When you go to the Board of Supervisors on the 16th, are we able to attend to support the chair and the co-chair?
Oh, you bet.
Okay. Just want to make sure. Okay.
Of course.
Chair?
Yes.
I know it's late, but if I could just take 30 seconds to thank you for your leadership here. I think that the fact that we got a unanimous vote on the final recommendation motion is a credit to you, your fairness, your wisdom, and I really appreciate your leadership and guidance here.
Thank you. Thank you.
And one quick, seconding those comments, also want to thank all our alternates, probably the most thankless job in the world. Go through the training, but don't say a word. Steve White, District 3 right there, and he has the advantage of looking a little bit like me, so if I wasn't here on some of those Zooms, I still think I got credit for attendance. So thank you guys for coming, and if it all goes wrong, you just got to remember, blame it on the alternates, you know. Thank you, everyone.
Then I'd like to add my comment.
Yes.
Reinforce, Steve, you have been fabulous. I appreciate your patience as well in getting us through this. It has been a particular pleasure for me to watch the inner workings of this county. I am so proud of San Joaquin County, and I feel privileged to have worked with my coworkers here on this committee, our consultants, and the very talented and dedicated staff in this county. So thank you very much all for this privilege.
Thank you very much. Yes, ma'am.
I second Pam's thoughts. I think we had a great committee. I think we were collaborative. We didn't fight. We did what we needed to do, and I thank everybody. I really appreciate the fact that this was as decent as it could be.
Mr. Morwitt.
I have to say the same thing. I think as a group, I didn't know what I was getting myself into, and I thought there'd be a lot of, quite frankly, political moves and trying to do things, and it wasn't that way. Everybody went and they looked at this thing as a whole for the county. I'm extremely impressed with the county. I never worked with the county so much as in the community development department, and I see the hard work they've done with Dave and Glenn, of course, and everyone that's been here today has done a great job, and IT department. But it was a great learning experience, and like I say, we hand it off now and see what they do with it. But we know that we really I think we did a great job, and it was a lot of fun working with everybody in this group. Thank you.
Yes, Benino.
Echo what everybody else said about staff and IT, because you guys have been here every sure that all of this here goes well and in the interwebs. And so thank you to staff, to the consultants. Just want to say thank you. I know I have a friend, a state representative in Pennsylvania, and they are starting this process, and it has been an interesting time to educate her as a state representative there, and because they have very different, and they're very hesitant, and I've been relaying to her how it has not been as bad as people think. So it's great to see everybody and get to know you guys, and I'm happy that we sent a 10-0 vote with 2 maps, and hopefully that will be good.
I agree. Thank you, staff. Thank you, all your knowledge and guiding us, and our chair. But I also want to say I'm proud of this county and how we're all able to work together. And kudos to our security guard that's still out there waiting for us to get to our cars safely. I can't leave them out because they've been so great and polite and patient with us too. So thank you, everybody. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, I want to say thanks to all the staff, all the members of the committee. Yeah, it's gone very well, really. I mean, if you follow anything in the news, there's some areas that are just fighting cats and dogs, and it's really worked out well.
Thank you. Thank you. As this whole entire process began, and I think that each and every one of us certainly can thank our district leaders for reaching out to us and asking us to be part of this very important process. It's been a long, hard process, and we certainly, I for one, have learned a lot. I want to take this opportunity to thank the county staff. Zoe, thank you very much for everything that you have done, keeping us on the straight and narrow. Thanks to Glenn Fowler for picking up the phone each and every time that I called, making sure that we're heading in the right direction. Thank you to the alternates for you are a very important part of this, and I think that Mr. Grunsky said it well. It's like going and sitting in a big jury trial for months on months on months, and you're just sitting there and you can't do nothing until you're called on, and you never know. And so thank you very much for all your help, and to the ones that are online. To each one of you, thank you very much for, you have made the process fun as we continue to go through here, and we've made the decisions. We've agreed to disagree amicably, and that's the way it should be. That's the way I run meetings. That's the way I think that it should be. And it's just that we're in a process that's very important. Now, next week, we will be, and we welcome each and every one of you there to attend the meeting next Tuesday at 1:30. That as we make our presentation, and once again, thanks to everyone. Thanks to the people who came out this evening. We certainly appreciate the fact that this is the last meeting and we have the largest attendance. Of course, a lot of them have left. A lot of them represented District 1. And then thank you to our Sheriff's Department for being here this evening. We certainly appreciate the help and support that you have given this commission. So with that, meeting is adjourned. My pleasure. You bet. You bet. I